Hi everyone, welcome to my review of Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now from 1979. So here we are with this film and back again with a Coppola review. Of course, I did give the Godfather 1 and 2 big reviews, very long reviews. I must say, back in August that was, it's part of my favourite films. I do this, every few months. I review, set out a definite kind of few dates or something where I kind of rewatch my favourites and review them for the channel, or just watch them and maybe not review all of them. But yes, this film here, I was waiting on this arriving. Here it is, the set here, 4K set, and yes, the third Godfather I will review. Make no mistake, in a few weeks probably. But yes, for now, here we are with another film, which is kind of, in some regards, equally as kind of loved maybe among cinephiles, and just it really is just some it's a big film, this, and spoilers alert, I will be getting into a lot of details here, although it won't be an analysis video. There's plenty of them out there, and this won't be quite that, but I'll be going into some of the other stuff here, and how things turn out, some deaths, so just be warned, of course. But here we are, and yes, I was waiting on this for a while. I was very excited for this, of course. And look at the inside. This is the artwork we have here. The art style, just amazing. That's the kind of thing you're getting as well on the menu when you put it in. So it's just amazing. It's just so good. It's so cool to see the kind of the menu here, and it just kind of it goes up, and you see different basically parts of the film. You see when it kind of pans up. You see the basically the ending act. It kind of represents that, and you've got Marlon Brando kind of within this. His head basically, very funny, but yes, and this is it. It kind of folds out. 6 discs here, just amazing. I won't go fold it all out, but unfold it all, but just amazing. If you love the film, it's a must own. And yes, the transfer itself, to sum it up, it absolutely blew me away. It's just everything I wanted, really. It doesn't lose the kind of, the sense of wonder to the film in terms of the look, and it keeps this film look. No doubt about that. It makes everything enhanced. It just looks more like a film in that sense. It looks more just layered, and more in that sense. It's just so much. It's even more haunting. It gets across all the different tones throughout the visuals in the film, and just it's just the lighting and everything. It's enhanced even further, and it's really cool and funny to see, actually. Over the years, I've gone from watching it on TV, and my TVs evolving over the years and stuff, to Blu-ray, and now we're here on 4K. And the one point I always kind of look at and kind of notice the improvements with my my viewing experiences have always been that one of the scenes is when Martin Sheen is, you see, he's basically reading, of course, and you've got the sweat, just pouring off of his face, and this time, that is enhanced even further. So you've got the box tick there, perhaps, if that's what you're going for. But yeah, basically that sums it up. This film is just, even more wonderful, which is something on this edition. So pick it up if you love the film, and of course you've got the final cut, which I won't be talking about here because I've not seen it. I watched the original version of this film, rewatched it for this review basically, and then I'll go back and watch final cut for the first time, obviously, and stuff, and give a separate video my overall thoughts on that, not another review. But yes, I wasn't as much of a fan of Redux, and I know it's more like that than the original final cut, but I am really looking forward to that, of course. But it'll be a separate video. This is for the original with the new transfer, and here we are. This film. Wow, so much to say, and of course it took me a while to review this after watching it a few weeks ago, because I was just so stunned. It's one of them films. I usually film my reviews, shoot them basically on the night. If I watch a film in a day, or the evening, I would film this review, at night / into the morning. I stay up late. And yes, basically I'd edit it and upload it within a day or a few days, or sometimes longer. But this film, you know, it really, it's one of them films that you just kind of, I'm left kind of speechless after watching it again. I couldn't really talk about this film immediately after, so I left it a little bit, and now I've got the time. Here we are. It's a Sunday night here, and you know it was a Sunday that I rewatched it on. Anyway, this film, now of course, it's one of the most popular films of all time. You know, it really, it's a film that you hear. You know, well, I guess I did anyway. You know, you hear about from a very young age. You know, you hear Apocalypse Now. In fact, you know, it's just always something I've kind of been aware of, even when I was really young. Maybe didn't know exactly what it was about, or even if it was a war film. I just knew, I heard Apocalypse Now, and you know, finally seeing it, I was at the age of 12/13. I can't be exact on that, but roughly that. I was watching a lot of Vietnam War films, and you know, you can debate actually if this is, you know, kind of a true Vietnam War film or even a war film. But for, you know, the case of the review, I do consider it a war film, just very different, and not necessarily an anti-war film. But yes, you know, it's a film that you know, I watched alongside, for the first time, films like Full Metal Jacket, which of course I love. You know, and The Deer Hunter I'd seen many. You know, I was about 8 or 9 when I saw that. But you know, loads of films like Platoon, which I think it's a good film. I don't love that film personally, but you've got that, and you've got Casualties of War I saw as well around this time. Many different war films, Vietnam War films specifically, and this is the one, for me, I must say that, you know, just when I saw this, I immediately thought that is something else. You know, that is the one that's the best, you know, I'd seen alongside all these. This film, for me, is the second best Vietnam War film, and one of the top 3 best war films in general. It really is, you know, right into the heights of cinema, and it really represents, you know, so much that I love about cinema, and one of them films that I love so much, but don't necessarily, you know how to explain how I feel about certain things, but I just know how I feel, if that makes sense. You know, it's kind of like a thing that I wouldn't be able to, you know, go through and explain every single scene, but I feel it. You know, I feel every single moment of this film, and it's an out of body experience, and it's a one that's, you know, it's a complete, you know, a journey, you know, in every sense, psychologically. You know, it's a visceral film, and it's poetic, it's haunting. You know, it's a horror film at times, you could say. It's an epic. It's a tragedy, and it's something that actually is truly, in the end, across the film, so moving, without actually having, you know, certain things that would happen in other films, you could say. There's a lot of suggestive stuff going on here. It's a lot of you know, spiritual, you know, symbolism, and it's stuff that you can't, you know how you feel about, but you can't quite explain maybe, and that's the sort of film that we're talking about here. This just blew my mind when I first saw it. You know, one of the things that I always, I was just like, wow, wowed by it is, well, of course, maybe the most famous scene, you know, the helicopter attack on the village, which, of course, uses Wagner, you know, Ride of the Valkyries, and you know, that's a piece that I you know, as a kid, since I was a kid, obviously, I was obsessed with classical music, and certain pieces, especially this. You know, whenever I heard it, I was kind of just had this weird effect on me, and you know, I didn't know it would be in the film, because you know, back then I didn't have a really computer, so I didn't know all this sort of thing, what would be in the film. And when I heard this, and it came on in this scene, this sequence, operatic sequence, you know, it done something, and you know, it's just wow. I was blown away. That scene is just well, one of the top 10 action scenes for me of all time. You know, and it has so much going on. You know, it's tragic, it's haunting. It's beautiful, there's no doubt, and it's epic, and just mind blown, and that's the whole film. You know, it's so much. You know, and of course, the main plot, as we know, you know, Captain Willard, you know, he's basically given this assignment, you know, kind of a secret mission, you know, if you will, to assassinate Colonel Kurtz, and journey down the river, and basically he takes people with him, you know, and stuff, and he goes. It kind of allows him to go maybe in some ways unnoticed, into Cambodia, through the river. Of course, when there's loads of explosions and and attacks happening and stuff, and madness, of course, we'll get to that, and then of course the final act, as we know if you've seen the film, is when Marlon Brando finally shows up, and you've got the final confrontation, and this for me, wow, that's something else entirely. We'll get to that, but this film, initially didn't receive unanimous acclaim, really. It got 2 Oscars though, but yes, it was quite divisive, and naturally, maybe I would understand, of course, if someone didn't know how to feel about certain things. It's one of the most, it's very ambiguous, of course, but it's so different in its approach and its form. But despite that, it's actually very, on paper and actually in terms of its narrative, in many ways, very linear. It's a lot of ambiguous moments and weirdness, we must say, strange feeling throughout the film that kind of becomes more and more, prominent, as we go on. It becomes more, kind of like a hallucinatory experience, more of a kind of out-of-body experience, very, very abstract at times, maybe, and it's something that the weird but genius use of, well, the classical music, but then you've got the kind of electronic music coming through, and Carmine and Francis Ford Coppola worked together on the score here. He'd done so much in this film. He wrote the film, co-written with John Mylou. He produced the film, of course, as well, directed and wrote it, of course, and yes, worked on the score as well. So it's something else. It really, really is, a visionary film. But you've got this kind of this weird kind of such a peculiar feeling that I constantly return to, because I'm so obsessed with this film. It is one of the mysteries, but also it's just a return for the explosive nature, for the how epic it is, for how powerful the experience is, and just I am involved, compelled from start to finish. This is not a film that I would ever see it as flat at all, or as boring, as a boring film. I instantly, at the age of 12, 13, was hooked. The narration, the editing, and just the overall, the way the mission is kind of briefed to Martin Sheen's character, our protagonist, of course, Willard, and then, just the way it's a constant journey, from then on. You've got things going on in the middle, you've got the helicopter attack, which kind of is so pivotal actually to the structure of the film, because from then on it's kind of more, it's actually more focused in the traditional sense. It's kind of explosive, and it's chaos, but then it's kind of more focused on the psychology, from then on, and it's kind of this weird but genius, once again, structure of the film. And then you've got the final act, which is in a kind of one location in that compound, which for me, is by far consistently the best, act of the film. I know a lot of people, especially initially, actually said the final act is the disappointment. Marlon Brando, of course, we won't get into too much of the production, but of course he showed up overweight, to the set. He said he had not read any material, he didn't read the script, eventually giving in to that, going through it with Coppola. It was a very funny production at times, but, very, wow, it's kind of maddening, and I guess that sums it up. The whole thing is chaos, and it's captured so in such a way, but you've got Martin Sheen having a heart attack, of course. You've got so much going on, and his brother actually had to be a stand-in at times when he was recovering from that. But you've got scripts and sets destroyed, all this kind of stuff going on here. But the final act was really, really criticised, and I think it's actually the most affecting and genius act of the film, despite maybe the helicopter attack being maybe the scene, or the sequence that I would think of the most when I think of this film, arguably, but and maybe the scene that I've rewatched, more and stuff. But seriously, the final act is something else. This is certainly when the film is. I would have to say this. It's not quite in my top 30 favourites, but I think in terms of quality, this probably is, in the top 30 finest films I've ever seen, and that is saying something. This is a real genius film, and I think it's not by the numbers far off the Godfather, the first Godfather film. The second Godfather, of course, Part Two, is by far my favourite kind of Coppola film. But I think this is definitely up there with his very very finest works. It's such a visionary film. It's everything. This one, it really is an experience. But it's just it's so masterful in every aspect. You've got, for me, one of the top 10 action scenes of all time is that that helicopter attack, the sequence there. You've got, I think this would be in my list of, I do lists, written lists and stuff. I've got cinematography, I've got editing. This would fit into both of them. I would say top 25 on both of them as well. I think it's something else. And in acting, in that sense, Martin Sheen, I think he's probably, I prefer him in Badlands, but wow, not far off this film. I think in many ways just as good. It's very very different, but it's kind of an unhinged character. We start off, of course, for me, with one of the greatest openings of all time, and we have that song, of course, by The Doors, The End, which for me is one of the finest songs of all time. I know it's maybe not a lot of people would say that, but I really have always loved that song, and especially the full version. But the way this is used in the film is absolutely genius. This is one of the very best openings. It's up there with 2001 and all these kind of films. It's just one of the very very finest. You've got the way that is used. When the actual lyrics come on, they start. You see the napalm. Wow, mind blown. And then of course you've got the way the editing is done here. You've got Martin Sheen, and the narration, fan as well on the ceiling, and it's kind of the symbolism, the connections here, the juxtaposition, and it's all combined to make one of the greatest openings of all time. And just the actual narration itself, we're saying about he's always there and he's never there kind of thing. It's such a genius thing what he's doing here. The narration is just genius. It's one of the best, and this is really so powerful straight away. And of course, some of this at the opening, 10 minutes is actual. It's not necessarily acting. It's kind of captured, of course, of Martin Sheen. Stuff going on there, and it's really, really, really powerful. And I've seen him really about an hour-long interview actually recently with him and Coppola, and they discussed that a little bit actually as well, and it's something that he was actually thankful to Coppola for. So it's really something. It's such a kind of it's kind of, this whole film is just so powerful and visceral and emotional, and this just sets the tone so perfectly. Then we have what you could really call some of the most normal moments in the film where he's getting briefed, but then you hear this tape, this recording, of course, of our the character, of course, that we are searching for the rest of the film, Colonel Kurtz, played by Marlon Brando. He's one of my top 10 actors. Just to say that, he's one of the best. And yes, you hear him, you hear what he's saying, and you've got the other characters, of course, briefing him. One played by Harrison Ford, which is really cool to see, of course. I guess this is it was filmed the scene before Star Wars actually was released and stuff, so I'm guessing anyway, and so yeah, it's one of his very very first roles, and yes, basically you hear this haunting stuff. It just paints a picture, of course, and that's what you have to go by, and you hear different things throughout the film. And you, of course, you see pictures. You've got all this information, documents on this character that Martin Sheen, of course, Willard is going through on the boat, and it just uses these techniques, where you don't see this character until the final act, but he's one of the before that is one of the most compelling characters, even though you don't see him till the final act, because it's so involving and it's just. Wow, it's disturbing. It's you're intrigued so much. At least I was. It's one of the great mystery films actually for me. It's one of these thrillers. It's like a classic classic mystery thriller, you know, but it's completely different. You know, it's a different setting, and this novella actually is, you know, it was made in published in 1899. So you know, it's placed though within the Vietnam War, which is really interesting actually. You know, and it sums up how it's not maybe particularly specifically a Vietnam War film. First and foremost, you know, I don't really consider it much of that, but it's really doing something so different, and I don't really consider this an anti-war film, although it's of course it's showing the horrors of war, but not necessarily being what you'd imagine really as an anti-war film, and it kind of just shows the horrors, the madness. This is the thing, not just of war, but of our world that we live in. Actually, it's very general, this film, although very specific and, you know, acute feelings psychologically. You know, it's really it's a genius film, but you know, it's kind of just, you know, our world in general and how mad it is. You know, and actually it's not, you know, condoning anything that Brando's character does in the end. You know, as we know, it's kind of a, you know, strange realization at the end, but you know, it's kind of just saying, you know, it is mad maybe, you know, kind of thing, but so is this, you know, so is the whole kind of the nature of war. You know, the whole point of sending, you know, sending someone in on a mission to assassinate this character, this individual, and all these men, you know, you're on the journey with, including a young man played by Laurence Fishburne. They all die, you know, tragically. You know, this is the sort of madness it's showing, and it's just kind of showing everything, you know, as mad. You know, this is mad. It's all insane, kind of thing, and it's not necessarily placing emphasis on one thing, maybe, you know, in particular more than another. And this is, you know, one of the genius things. The sincerity of this film, this picture, is something to behold. It's not a preachy film at all. It's not got, you know, necessarily messages. It's exploring different themes, and I think it's just so good that it's not entirely wrapped up in specific ways where, you know, what I'm saying, the ambiguity of the film is really a strength of the film. It's actually kind of the key, you know, kind of aspect of the film, is exploring all these themes, but never does he really make a statement, you know, kind of thing. And it allows us to get more, in many ways more, you know, what we bring to the film, what we take from the film. It's our own kind of experience, but with some of the, you know, the mastery of filmmaking, no doubt, you know, in editing, in cinematography, in you know, just the use of music, specifically in acting, in you know, in its script. One of the things that, you know, really affects me every time is the tragedy, of course, of this film. You know, it's a beautiful film, of course, the way it's captured and what it says about humanity, and how sincere it is, and how kind of you know, charming it is at times as well, this film. But there's a real tragedy, of course, you know, within every character, really. You know, and of course, characters such as Clean, and Chef, and Chief, of course, as well. You know, they all die, of course. You know, they all have their own tragedies, of course. And then, of course, Colonel Kurtz. You know, this character of Willard, you know, is sent in on a mission to assassinate Kurtz, but then you really feel, you know, by the end of this, and once you actually see him in the flesh and everything, even though he's doing things that, you know, are insane and are, you know, he's beheading people, of course, all this kind of stuff. You know, there's such a kind of complexity to this, and such humanity, and a real sadness to his death, you know, at the end, and that's one of the finest deaths in cinema, you know, just the way it's done. And you know, this, you know, to say that this film starts off as one of the best mysteries, of course, the way it kind of introduces this character before he's even on screen, you know, it's a kind of film where, you know, some films like this, you know, you've got thrillers that disappoint when the you know, things are revealed at the end. Specifically, you know, a character like Kurtz, if it's revealed in particular ways, you know, it could disappoint, and it could, you know, the way it's hyped basically throughout the film, kind of thing. His appearance, it could be a disappointment. But in this film, you know, when you finally see, you know, Brando here, you know, as Kurtz, this is just one of the best, you know, climaxes of all time, in my opinion. The final act is, as I've said, it's off the charts. What you have here is one of the most affecting, you know, sequences in cinema. The dialogue here is just, it really is soul piercing. It really, really is, and it's so. Nothing is really absolute, as I say, in this, and it's something that you can just you feel, you know, you feel the dialogue even. It's such a wonderful final act, and you know, it's just in terms of just you know, the way this is captured visually as well, and you know, the lighting, everything like this it's just so epic. It's so amazing, this film, and throughout, of course, the way the sunset is captured. And you know, specifically that scene, you know, the helicopter attack, that scene on the village, you know, that is a mix of everything film. As I've said, you know, it's haunting. It's got beauty in it. It's epic. You know, the use of music here and everything. The way that, you know, the music is used here. You know, the explosions, the gunfire, and for me, the defining moment of the scene, actually, the sequence is the moment when the music, you know, is just rousing, and then the helicopters are just, you know, coming just over the water there, and you know, then it just swells, and then in there, you know, that is just wow. It's one of the finest moments in cinema for me. It really, really is, and just I think the way he's capturing everything in the film is just absolutely mind blowing. You know, you've got moments early on as well, before the attack scene where you see a little funny cameo as well by Coppola himself, hilarious. But yes, you know, I think every time I'm just kind of wrapped up in the chaos. You know, all these helicopters flying by. You know, you've got the trees swirling in the wind. You've got everyone, just so much going on here. This is chaos, you know, and it's just, I think the way it's captured and the way it's just, there's so much of it, and it's so, you know, wow, what must have gone into that, you know, staging that, and preparing that as well, and making sure it's just right here. You know, it just always gets me so wrapped up, and I just, you know, it's certainly one of them films where you forget you're watching it. You're just in there. You know, it's just so overwhelming with feeling, and you know, it is such an experience. This, and then you know, you've got introductions of, wow, some of the most iconic characters. You know, Kilgore, played by Robert Duvall, and you know, it's not the gentle Tom Hagen, you know, that he played in the Godfather films. He is, you know, arrogant. He's, you know, a horrible guy, really. You know, just, you know, another insane character, really. And you know, he's the one that leads the attack, of course, on the village. And constantly, of course, you know, you've got that stuff that he's trying to get at. You know, constantly he's going on about surfing, you know, and stuff on the waves, of course. Amongst all of this, you know, what's going on here? People getting killed, mass amounts of people here getting killed, and you know, his own men getting shot at. All he can talk about a lot of the time here is surfing. Now that is an insane, you know, moment. That's an insane point, and that, you know, is one of the things that makes up this whole you know, theme that, you know, everything here is mad. You know, what a mad world we live in. This always gets me. It's just kind of thing you laugh at, because you're just got so kind of you know, you're kind of what the hell is going on with this character? He's insane, you kind of thing, and it really just delves into this throughout the film. Everything that goes on, you know, in the film, and you've got people just getting mindlessly killed, of course. You've got the way that the jungle is such a kind of, you know, maybe the harshness of nature, and how this is driving these characters in the boat, you know, insane as well. And kind of, I love how it's kind of, you know, in a lot of films that set on or around the water, you know, kind of can be flat, you know, but this is not the case. It's one of them films that's just so compelling. I love how they're on the boat for most of the film. They're journeying through, and they have different moments where they get out of the boat, of course, different sequences elsewhere, and they kind of, but it's a constant journey, and the boat is the, you know, the journey up the river is the main, you know, structure of the narrative. You know, you've got different things branching off, but it's constantly from A to B, really. You know, there's a goal at the end of this, and it's to assassinate this character, who we learn about more throughout the film. But then, you know, we learn, you know, many other things in the final act. But that is the film. You know, that's the main structure of the film in many ways. It's going from A to B in a river, on the boat, of course. Quite a small crew here, in terms of these main characters on the boat, and then, but it's so much, he turns this into one of the most compelling and out of body experiences of all time. It really, really is a absolute true magnum opus, in my opinion. This is one of the very finest films ever made, and it's always been one of my favourites. I absolutely adore this film, and I think just the acting, Martin Sheen just gives such a commanding performance. You've got, so many performances in this film. Laurence Fishburne as well. He's a character who, that's a real tragedy with his character of Clean. Of course, when you hear that tape, the message from his parents, that is so sad. It always brings a tear to my eye, and how he was so young and he never got to return home to, be with his family. It's just a really horrible moment, and it's a film that really values the lives, of different characters in the film. It says something about humanity, but it also kind of shows the madness and how, so many people die just aimlessly, and it's for something that always just confuses me. War, and it's something where, but Coppola really, he says so many different things in this film. So many themes are explored. You've got just so much, and it's just really the internal conflict as well that's really constantly kind of explored here within everyone, really. I also love, the line, and the key moment in the film, when Martin Sheen's character is getting briefed, of course, in that one of the early scenes there, as we know, and there's a line that kind of, basically saying that at some point, in someone's life, an evil, part of them, or the bad side of someone can overtake the good that maybe once was, and of course it kind of explores this within the character, of Kurtz, and how you learn that he was once, just he's doing well educated, performing so well. He's got an amazing track record, as it's said in the film. But then of course there's one moment in his life, things turn, of course, and then of course he's going, as we know, in the final act especially, he's beheaded people. He's doing things that are just, he's out of control in many ways, and this moment, early on, in this line, really is a way of, you see this constantly, how the evil side, maybe if you call it that, can corrupt in many ways. We're seeing someone's soul can coexist, maybe, as well at the same time. Evil and good, it's something that's very complex, never fully answered, but just maybe manifestations of this are within just everyone in the film. At one point, all this war, war is coming from this. Every individual person, it's something where an evil side can take over. The darkness, and war is something that's always happened, unfortunately, throughout the world, and this is coming from within this, and it's a perfect way in this film to explore these themes, but the internal, and the external conflict, if you will, and linking it, not specifically in a very direct way, but it's something you can maybe pick up on, and just in general, that scene, that line, it's just a great line in film, and that moment, when he says about this, and specifically there about Brando's character, but really it's a turning point, and you can take this line and this feeling, and just kind of look at the film through this, and see this numerous examples of this, and it all comes from kind of within, internal, conflict, of course, and it's just a genius film in the way it's doing this, and in that sense, it's one of the most personal films, and one of the most grandest, epic, in scope films, and just as a whole as well, just the madness of it all, and it's such a it really, it puts like this kind of trance. It puts you in a trance, this spell on you perhaps, and I think to link in actually of the Redux version. I think actually one of the reasons why I didn't respond to that as much is because actually the scenes, perhaps the French plantation scene, perhaps, that's the one I remember being. I didn't see the point in that. It just kind of takes you out of this experience, this constant immersion, actually, and just the way it kind of, it's too much sidetracking, I feel, and the way that they're constantly, in the boat a lot of the time, and they have different moments, but it's the journey, the constant flow of the film I actually think is broken, and therefore the trance, perhaps, of this whole experience is actually slightly broken when you've got scenes like that. You've got kind of a funeral. I saw it many years ago, that one, only once, but I believe there's kind of like a funeral in that one as well. A scene there, and it's just too much going off, and actually I think it loses the fantastical nature of the film. That's what this is. It's a real fantastical experience. It's something that really, it just takes you somewhere else. Really elevates the soul, you could say. It's such a spiritual film, and just this trance-like feeling you get, but also realism, a kind of documentary style at times, but it's just a combination of all this. Just wow, and just as I say, the way that these sunsets are captured, it's a real grand film. This is a big film in everything, and it's kind of, it's captured in a way that you just feel a real sense of awe and wonder, even just as I say, the sky and everything, and great films do this. I think in their visual storytelling, they make the kind of real world seem completely different. It's something that's not. It's a real fantastical film. This is something that is captured so in such an awe-inspiring way, and just in the framing, in the lighting, in everything, in the way the action is shot and edited. It absolutely is in the top 25 in terms of cinematography and editing, hands down. This is a real a visual achievement that's really quite close to being in the top 10, actually, in that regard. It's such a stunning film, actually, this one, in terms of its visuals. It really is up there with the first Godfather, close to it at least, for its visuals. Maybe not the second one, I'd say that's the best Coppola, film, but also just specifically the visuals and stuff. But this is really one of his finest achievements. In this decade, for Coppola, the 70s, what a decade. As I've said many times, probably my favourite decade in film, certainly for the heights, and just how many of them are real high members of my top 50 especially. I think. But Coppola, he made The Conversation. We mustn't forget that one, that masterpiece. He made the first two Godfathers and Apocalypse Now in this decade. Just to name them, that really is something. The second best for me director of the 70s in terms of the body of work, just behind Kubrick, because I can't deny Barry Lyndon and A Clockwork Orange are my favourite, two best films for me of the entire 20th century. So I have to say that gets the edge in Kubrick. But despite just being two films there, but Coppola is second in line, I think, for his work in the 70s. Really. And that says a lot, because so many, Malick as well. But this film is just, I can understand if someone says it's their favourite, and if someone says it's the most affecting piece, that Coppola ever brought to the screen. It's something else, it's fantastical, it's visceral, it's spiritual. It takes this, real mystery, of course, this, what you could say in its structure is very straightforward at times, but there's a feeling of it, it's the kind of, the trance it puts you in, the way it kind of approaches the narration, it puts you in this kind of state consistently, never lets go, the original version specifically, and then in the final act you're thrown into this, and when these two characters meet finally, it's one of the most satisfying yet strangest confrontations in cinema. You leave with answers. I hope them answers are never answered, for me, because I take what I need. I've already taken enough from the film. I don't need to know precisely everything. I love how it's ambiguous, and it's kind of, it suggests many different things at the ending, and a way maybe that Willard is kind of has become the next Kurtz, maybe in many ways, and he's kind of, Kurtz will live on, actually. There's a very a wonderful shot actually there towards the end where it just overlaps slightly there. The kind of fade there, the cross fade there. It suggests maybe that Kurtz lives on even though he's dead in Willard. And it's something where the ideologies, of just humanity, but in war as well, are explored, but never truly answered. But you can take what you want from this film, and it's such a mind-blowing experience, such a beautiful, beautiful film in a way. It's captured in every sense, in kind of its feeling, in its power, in its humanity. You've got tragedy, you've got comedy as well. I love these characters. I love, Clean. I love Chef, Chief. All these characters. Laurence as well. They're also compelling. I love the scene where Laurence Fishburne, his character is kind of dancing to Satisfaction, Rolling Stones song, of course. Amazing song. It's got an amazing soundtrack, and it's moments like this, great comedy in the film, but you've also got the tragedy, and that's why I care as well about these. I care about these characters, and when they do die and they kind of get picked off, of course, as we go further into this, I'll say it once again, descent into madness. I love saying that, of course, but it really applies here. And yes, once they get further into this, so many of them die, and it's so powerful. It really, really is. It's very it's so valued as well. And it's just, this film is just one of the finest of all time. It really covers so much. The scope of it, despite being quite short, really, especially for what it's covering, and around 150 minutes, of course, and compared with the Godfather films, it's kind of, it's not too long at all, but it covers so much ground. It's such a scope to it, and it just has such a flow, and this is all despite the production, but then, as we say, the most important thing and the thing that matters really is just the final product, the final work of art, and that is Apocalypse Now. In whatever version you personally love the most, respond to the most, which really it doesn't matter too much. It's all personal preference, of course. Whatever version you like the most. It's a film that it's just so wonderful in my opinion. It's one of the most it's haunting. It's lyrical, of course. The narration constantly gets you in the mind of this character. Although still, so much is not explored with the characters. But that's the strength of the film as well. And Kurtz is still a mystery, really. He's, the stuff he says in the final act. A lot of it is things that you're still kind of just in awe of, and you don't really know how to process what he's doing. He's such Brando, in this film brings such a presence. This is one of his very, very finest performances I've seen on the waterfront, and I think that's a masterful one as well. It really, really is one of the best films. But I'd have to say, if you ask me now, I think The Apocalypse Now is an even finer performance than that. I think his best is The Godfather, but this is a fairly close second actually for me. This film, despite it being criticised and maybe being quite, in the grand scheme of things, kind of very, in the moment maybe, and one that was not exactly prepared for. But that's sometimes the style of Brando's acting. What he done here. He was an actor who didn't, he'd done his own methods. He'd done things differently. Sometimes, not maybe just to be, maybe a bit different. But the end results usually were absolutely stunning, and that's all that matters really. And whatever he said about the craft, I think we all know really. He was just someone who put all into his his actual the end result really, and the performance here is just it's such a he appears godlike, mythic figure, and that's also due to the lighting and all this kind of stuff. But due to actual events, of course, him turning up in different ways, but and they were forced to kind of do this, Coppola and stuff. But it's someone who appears as this godlike symbol, perhaps, this figure, mythic individual, and you're kind of, it's weird, a strange gentility to the character, and then you've got outbursts, and it's one of the best characters in film. It's so it's constantly, I am just compelled by this. The whole film, all the performances, Robert Duvall, You know, not in too much of the film, but he is one of the most memorable characters in a film. You know, and of course Martin Sheen, the great Martin Sheen, what a wonderful individual, and just up there with Badlands for me in terms of his performance. I'd probably give the edge to that one, but this is, as I say, it's on the level, and yeah, it's just everyone in the film. Dennis Hopper, you know, his insane appearance, you know, insane character too, very entertaining, of course, and yes, you know, everything in this film, these characters, this mission that's given to our protagonist, you know, he does not know what he's getting himself in for, and you know, every time I see this, I love it more and more. I'm more affected by the film. It's a personal film that Coppola puts his heart and soul into, and everyone involved, I feel personally. You know, the cinematography, the editing is some of the very, very finest I've ever seen. You've got moments in this, you know, it's a giant film. It's a godlike film, really. You know, everything it just seems, you know, it seems like you're dwarfed by everything in the film. You know, you seem like a very small. You feel very small when watching this film, a very small individual, and it's something I can't quite explain, but it's due to everything, you know, in the filmmaking and the narration and just the spell he puts on you. Everyone involved, of course, but Coppola really just he does something in this film where, you know, I'm wondering, you know, everything in the film and life. You know, it's kind of just, you know, so awe-inspiring. It's unbelievable, and you know, it's just I'm looking at the screen and I'm looking through this, you know, in this world where everything seems, you know, kind of quite scary and big, and you know, it's so strange. You know, even though it's kind of set mainly around the river, of course, and you know, journeying through. In many ways, quite a contained, you know, experience, but so grand as well, majestic. You know, operatic film. You know, it's something where you know, this is art. You know, this really is. It's an experience. It's cinema. It really is cinema, and there's no way I can justify you know, kind of giving this anything other than my absolute highest rating of 100% plus. Tier S. This is one of the truest, and I mean it, magnum opuses of all time. You know, it's perfect, of course, but you know, I don't care. You know, it's something that goes way beyond that, like the greatest films, and you know, it's one of these, you know, just you know, speechless, almost once again, you know, talking about the film, because what an experience, what a creation. You know, it's scary how good this film is. You know, it's kind of wow, you know, has a real effect on me, and you know, it's not something I can say or I can explain through words, as you know, as we know, you know, everything about the film, or you know, what this means, what that means. But you know, first of all, it's not meant to be, but secondly, that's okay. You know, I'd be okay if I never knew how to kind of articulate my thoughts on many moments, because I love to just feel the film. You know, really, it's one the way you experience it. You feel very raw, and you know, at the same time as well, out of body, you know, spiritual experiences with the film. You feel so much, and then you've got these explosive moments. You've got the helicopter attack, which is one of my, you know, favorite moments in a film. It's one of the finest 10 action scenes for me, in my opinion. You've got this cinematography, the use of colors, you know, use of mist, you know, and darkness as well. You know, the scenes that are filmed in darkness as well. You know, and the lighting here. You know, just this is how you create a sense of wonder throughout film. And that final act, as I say, I think it's just the most mind blowing. It's the one I've talked about maybe the least, maybe in this review, or you know, so because that's what it is. You know, it's the one that of everything in the film, you know, you can kind of talk about. I think the final act is the one that, you know, I think everyone has their own personal experiences with, and how they're kind of maybe shocked at. You know, some people have been disappointed by it. I'm overwhelmed by the final act personally. You can be, you know, you can find it, you know, funny perhaps, you know, but you know, kind of you know, scary, you know, haunting. It's so many different things. And you know, it's just it's one of the best final acts in film. This is one of the very finest for me of all time. It's definitely in the top 30 best, and not, it's definitely extremely high in my top 100. As we know, the tier S is not reserved for too many films really. It's certainly it's a rating that I give to very little films overall, in terms of all the films in over the century of what film has existed for. I think to give less than well, certainly at the moment 70 films this rating is it really does there's a real value that I place on these films, specifically to the, in the meaning that they have to me personally. And yes, just I think this is a supreme magnum opus by one of the finest directors of all time. Top 15 for me, Coppola. It's full of passion. This film, it's full of energy. It's explosive. It's majestic, grand, epic. Intimate film. It deals with trauma. Martin Sheen's character. It really moves me what happens with his character and how he deals with this, and it's kind of a mask he wears, throughout the film. It's something else, really something else. All these characters I love, the banter between them, the tragedy to it all is really moving, truly moving. The haunting use of music, and the actual existing music that's used as well. It's all combined to make an entrancing experience. There's films like this where you're offered worlds to step into as a viewer and experience, just simply experience and see things differently, or maybe just feel things that you can't elsewhere. This is a film that, as I've said, is a complete fantastical and bizarre, dreamy, hypnotic experience that doesn't explain everything, and I think it's pure genius, and I think it's awe-inspiring. It's so much fun. It's constantly engaging in its dialogue, in its narration, of course. In its visuals, it's visual storytelling. Constantly, we are revealed information, and the way the information is captured and given to us, and the way we take it in, it's just pure genius. This is cinema. This is what it can do. And it's ambiguous, and I think it's a film that benefits from that massively. If we had an ending that was more absolute, more kind of explaining, I don't think it would have been as effective. This is just one of the true haunting, visionary pieces, of cinema. It is one of my favourite films of all time, and maybe not top 30 favourites, but top 30 in terms of quality, and certainly right up there with my favourites. Not far off that. It is one of my most loved films. It just the way I just when I talk about film, I always feel a sense of wonder to the great works of cinema, and just cinema is my favourite thing, of course, by far. That exists, and this is just one of them films, that just represents everything that I love about the medium, and just how I feel passionate so much. It's not, it sits among many, many different films of different genres and stuff, but ones that aren't maybe ambiguous, and ones that are very different, romance films and stuff, but I can proudly say this is among them, because it's a very different film from them, but one that I do feel, in many regards, just as powerful emotions, as some of these films. So yes, thanks for watching. Of course, I've loved rewatching this film. I'm thankful, of course, to the restoration, everyone involved behind this, for Coppola, genius that he is, and I'm really intrigued by his next project. We're hearing about a little bit, more and more. And yes, I think this film, I would love to hear people's thoughts on the film. If you didn't, respond to it, if you don't know how you feel about the film, which is understandable, of course. And if you love the film, and maybe talk about Coppola, his films, his filmography, of course. Just Brando and stuff. So much in this film, so much of my favourite actors, and of course Coppola, one of my favourite filmmakers. Some of my favourite music. It encapsulates everything. This film, and it's for the record, the third best kind of war film, really for me, and it's just the second best Vietnam War film in that sense. But it's about the madness of life, the world we live in, the horrors, but the madness, the insanity, and sincerely, without any bias, explores this. Never fully answers this, but we experience it, in many ways, whether it be in poetic ways, visceral feeling, or elsewhere. Different feelings, it's something, it does everything, this film. One of the best, absolutely can be put against so many films that are regarded as the finest, and this one really is right up there with my personal favourites, and it's just cinematic perfection beyond, really goes into the heights. And as always, thanks for watching my review.